Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the opening ceremony of the second Hiroshima Junior International Forum. I'm Hirono Nishioka and I'm Ayano Okazaki, the second grader of Hiroshima Prefecture Yasufuruichi High School, serving as the masters of the opening ceremony. Thank you very much for having us here today. First, let me briefly introduce you to the Hiroshima Junior International Forum. The Hiroshima Junior International Forum is organized to provide foreign high school students, Hiroshima high school students, and international students studying in Hiroshima with an opportunity to get together in Hiroshima. Hear the voices of Hibakusha and visit the Peace Memorial Museum to find out the reality of the atomic bombing. They also have discussions under the theme of what we can do to realize a peaceful world and present the results in the form of the Hiroshima Declaration. This year marks the second time. The results of the group discussion and the Hiroshima Declaration will be reported at the debriefing session in this venue on August 19 from 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. I hope you will join us again. On the occasion of the opening, we have Governor of Hiroshima Prefecture, Hidehiko Yuzaki, to extend to you a few words of welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. It's very hot today in Hiroshima. Thank you very much for gathering here in Hiroshima today. As I introduced, I'm Hidehiko Yuzaki, the governor of Hiroshima Prefecture. Today marks the second anniversary of the Hiroshima Junior International Forum. Thank you very much for joining us with this opening ceremony. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to high school students from overseas. Foreign high school students living in Japan have also joined us this time. So we have students from a total of 29 countries and territories. Thank you very much for joining us. And high school students and international students from the prefecture of Hiroshima, thank you very much for your participation. We have the invited keynote lecturers, the former ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary permanent representative of Japan to the Conference on Disarmament, Toshio Sano, the director of the United Nations Information Center in Tokyo, Kaoru Nemoto, and the executive director of CSO Network Japan, Kaori Kuroda. I sincerely appreciate you for coming to Hiroshima. And would like to express my deepest gratitude to the facilitators for their cooperation, Professor Noriko Sado from Hiroshima Shudo University. And we have other lecturers, so I'd like to express my appreciation for their cooperation, and members from the Global Shaper Community and initiative of the World Economic Forum. Thank you for your continued support. 11 days ago, on August 6, Hiroshima observed the 72nd anniversary of the atomic bombing. Hiroshima rebuilt itself from the ashes to a beautiful city, but 72 years ago, even if looking at this area only, thousands of people were killed and nearly all buildings were burnt. The horror of the atomic bombing is more than that. In the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park, there is a children's peace monument. You will visit the park this evening. This monument was modeled after Sadako Sasaki, who was exposed to radiation and contracted leukemia 10 years later. she kept folding paper cranes, hoping for a recovery. However, after 8 months of battle with leukemia, she died at the age of 12. In May last year, the former U.S. President Obama visited Hiroshima, the first president who had visited Hiroshima. At that time, he folded a paper crane and handed it to children, expressing his sympathy to Sadako's wish. Furthermore, in his speech at the park, President Obama showed his determination of nuclear abolition to the world. He also mentioned about the children of Hiroshima who are going through their day in peace and said it is worth protecting this and then extending it to every child. That is a future we can choose. Participants in the Hiroshima Junior International Forum you, the younger generation, is the leaders who play an important role in realizing international peace. The prefecture of Hiroshima is working on the realization of a peaceful world free of nuclear weapons. However, this initiative cannot be achieved only by Hiroshima, but requires understanding and cooperation, participation from people around the world. As part of this initiative, we are holding the second Hiroshima Junior International Forum. In this forum, domestic and international high school students have discussions and exchange their views regarding international peace and send a message toward the realization of a peaceful world without nuclear weapons. Participants can also deepen their mutual understanding. In this sense, this forum can help us to nurture the next generation of leaders and enhance the capabilities of Hiroshima as an international center for peace. In a peaceful area, it is difficult for people to realize the tragedy of war and understand the importance of peace. On the other hand, in a conflict area, people cannot feel about benefits from a peaceful world. The last result of war is the use of nuclear weapons. But with the foundation of peace, it is possible to achieve recovery and prosperity, which is what we have today in Hiroshima. So I want you to see and perceive the Hiroshima's reality, recovery and prosperity at first hand. I hope you understand the reality of Hiroshima, and I hope that you actively discuss what you can do in your respective positions in order to achieve peace and then create a Hiroshima Declaration. In conclusion, the persons involved in the Hiroshima Junior International Forum, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation for your great support and cooperation in holding this event. Thank you very much. So over the coming days, I hope you have an active discussion. Thank you. Thank you. Now, let me introduce to you the participants in the second Hiroshima Junior International Forum. I shall now read the names of the participants. Please rise when your group names are called. First, foreign high school students, please rise. Students from the Sichuan of China, Hawaii of the United States, and Guanajuato of Mexico. These states have established the sister state relationships with the prefecture of Hiroshima. Among the 47 prefectures in Japan, Hiroshima has the largest number of immigrants. And we have a very close relationship with the Japanese who live in overseas. And a member of Hiroshima Kenjinkai Argentina, one of the overseas Hiroshima Kenjinkai. And currently more than Afghanistan, Australia, Bangladesh, Brazil, Cambodia, Canada, Colombia, France, Germany, Ghana, India, Indonesia, Iran, South Korea, Laos, Malaysia, Mongolia, Myanmar, Nepal, New Zealand, Peru, Spain, Taiwan, England, Vietnam. So we have students who live in Japan or overseas. So in total, we have high school students from 29 countries and regions. Please be seated. Next, high school students of Hiroshima Prefecture, please rise. We have 40 students who applied for this program. Please be seated. This concludes the opening ceremony of the second Hiroshima Junior International Forum.
Next, we'd like to begin the keynote speeches. In the beginning, we'd like to invite Ambassador Toshio Sano, the extraordinary and plenary ambassador of the permanent representative of Japan to the conference this summer. His presentation is entitled How Global Community Looks at Japan and its Future Course. After he joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he served as Director General and Ambassador to Denmark, and from 2013 to last year, he was Ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary of the permanent representative of Japan to the Conference of Disarmament. Ambassador, please. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I was given 30 minutes for my presentation, but as you see, this is my title, the title of my presentation. And what I'm going to talk right now is my view, personal view. I'm not standing on the Japanese government position. Please be aware. Please note that. And today's presentation includes two major messages. The one, the communication is very important. In particular, in the international society, if we are going to work in the international society, the communication is very important. There's sufficient to communicate. Without sufficient communication, that will lead misunderstanding and self-understanding, and that can lead to the unfortunate result. We have seen such a history so many times. So the deep communication is very important among Japanese, among the between the people in the countries, in the different countries. And the second is how Japan should survive in the future. What kind of values should be upheld, and my personal view will be expressed. So this is another summary of my presentation. I'm not going to follow the order, but first of all, I'd like to talk about misunderstanding. Misunderstanding here means the misunderstanding of Japanese toward Japanese, and the misunderstanding from the international community looks at Japanese. I would like to show you several examples. First of all, Japanese have a small power mentality, as listed here. Japanese tend to have the mentality that we are a small country. At home and at school, we were told that Japan is a small country. I was taught in that way too. The Ryotaro Shiba, the well-known novelist, and in his book Clouds Above the Hill, he said, Japan is a truly small country. It is about to bloom. If you think of the small country, Japan is a very small country in 1868. So Shiba recognized that Japan is a small country. However, what is the reality? Is Japan really a small country? Yes, if we think of the land area, size of the land, it is the 61st of the 193 countries of the United Nations members. If we the exclusive sea zone, then Japan is the 6th largest in the world. So that means that Japan is an ocean country. That in terms of population is the 10th, and with 120 million. And then as for the defense expenses, 8th in the world. And for the GDP, it is 3rd in the world. And distribution to the United Nations, the 2nd after following the United States. And also ODA, the official development aids, Japan is giving the ODA for the 4th. So this is not a small country in the world, in the international community. I think that the international community thinks Japan is a large country. Of course, if you think of the size of land, the Japanese land is small compared to China, United States, and Russia. But Japan is not a small country based on the many factors. But the Japanese think, and the Japanese have been taught Japan is a small country, and Japan is an island country as well. This is just a coincidence. And because Japan is surrounded by the seas, so because of that, Japan has been safe. We're looking back over the history, and the Kublai Khan tried to invade in the 16th century, but the typhoon came, and the Mongolian troops and Korean troops were defeated. And after that, Japan's never invaded by the foreign forces. In most recent past, after the end of the 1945, for 6 years, Japan was occupied. But 1952, Japan was independent again. That was in April. But because of that situation, Japan's sense of safety or security is not so strong. That means we think we are safe. And we also have a mentality of or believing that Japan is a small country. So Japan is not so sensitive to the international situations and international society. So Japan has a less sense of responsibility to the international community. That is one of the examples I said in terms of the misunderstanding. Then, and also misunderstanding of the Japanese toward the international society. One is Japanese glorifies the international society after the opening up the country in the Meiji era. Iwakura Tomomi sent the delegation to Europe and the United States and for over 1.9 months to learn from the West. At the time, Japan thought we would have a model in a small country like Belgium, not the great power like the United States or the Russia, Imperial Russia. The delegation went to the West to learn what Japan could do. And but decided Preußen that got independent at that time. Japan decided to learn from them. At that time, Japanese government believed that the West model is best, and the situations of the international community were introduced to Japan to learn what was going on in the world. It was important to learn. But at the same time, Japan did not have so much strong will to breed that kind of model within from the Japan. But Japan wanted to learn from other countries, not create from inside. Another one is that there is a misunderstanding the international community has to Japan. So they think that Japan may have nuclear weapons. This forum is in Hiroshima, and you may discuss the nuclear weapon or disarmament. However, many countries in the world think that Japan may have nuclear weapons, but the Japanese do not believe that Japan will have nuclear weapons because we had Hiroshima, we have Nagasaki. That according to the public poll, more than 80% of the Japanese people believe we do not have nuclear weapons. But some countries in the world do not believe that. And if you look into the Far East situation, North Korea is developing the nuclear missiles, and Russia has nuclear weapons, and China has nuclear weapons. So Japan will have nuclear weapons as well. That misunderstanding is now existing in the international society. Another misunderstanding from Japanese side to the international community is in the later 16th century in Florence in Italy, North Italy. There is a person called philosophy or the bureaucrat called Niccolo Machiavelli. The Machiavelli wrote Il Principe, and it is something like a national theory of a nation. So we can call it a theory of a nation. And Machiavelli said politics should be separated from the ethics and religion. And he analyzed and established the political dynamics. In North Italy at that time, he was an employee of Medici family, and he believed plotting, scheming, and the nation should have that kind of plotting, so it is far from the ethics established with religion, Christianity. So his theory is the basis of the modern politics, and many Japanese know the name of Machiavellism very much, but Machiavellism itself is far from the Japanese mentality, because Japanese ethics level is very high. From the at home, at school, we are told we should not tell a lie. Lying is the thieving, and you have to believe in the faith of the others, and many people around you will be nice. That is the ethics we are told. We have been told from a childhood. So Japanese people believe that the international society is the same. It is safe. You can believe in people wherever you go. The Japanese, I worked in the overseas for 24 years. From the beginning, I think I believe the people are nice. Is that true? The people here, the non-Japanese, are nice. But is it true everywhere? That if you look into the world from the ethical perspective view, you believe that the Japanese people tend to believe that people are nice. But they are not based on the facts. If you have a high level of ethics, then you tend to believe the people around you are nice. So there are the misunderstandings of Japanese people have toward the international society, and the Japanese people misunderstanding Japanese people have toward the Japanese, and the international community has to Japanese people. So this stems from the miscommunication, lack of communication. Misunderstanding is created by the miscommunication. We have to get out from this several series of misunderstandings. So we cannot say just in one word what international community is. We have Europe, United States, America, Latin America, and Russia. But what does the world expect Japan or Japanese people to do? I would like to talk about that now. They want Japanese people to be vocal, to talk about what they are thinking. they want Japanese people to send clear messages. It is not so easy for Japanese to do this because Japanese people tend to work in a group, behave in a group. So we make a decision on a consensus of the group, and so some eccentric. It is very difficult. Japanese people tend to hesitate to talk about some unusual idea. They try to suppress themselves, not to say their own opinions. That is a tendency or a trait Japanese people have. But now what is expected on Japan is to be vocal. And then they want to send a clear message. Clearly speak, articulate. The second item what the international community expects Japan to do is that they want Japan to be more active and take more responsibility for the international affairs, because Japanese people have insurism and a small power mentality. Then the Japanese people tend to be less interested in the international affairs. And because we are living in a small country, we cannot participate in the forming the international framework. But Japan is not a small country, so it is something like a tiny fish will grow to the large fish, but they believe they are still a small fish. But from looking outside, it is not a small fish, but the small fish that used to be with a small fish still believes it is a small one, but it is not. So because of that mentality, a small country mentality, the Japanese people tend to be take less responsibility for the international affairs. And then the international community expects Japan to provide Japan's wisdom. I would like to talk about one anecdote. I worked in Saudi Arabia for 3 years, and it is hot, about 50 degrees Celsius. And I went around the country to give a speech introducing Japan and the culture of Japanese culture. At the time of the question and answer session, there are the questions differently asked to me. That is, Japan was successful in the modernization, and the traditional values and historical values. You have not lost such values after modernization. How did you do that? In Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia is now facing a globalization and modernization with high income of from the petroleum. The new buildings are being built, and values owned by the Muslim and the Bedouin. How we can achieve the modernization without losing those values? Japan was successful. Tell us how to do that. Next question is about in the Japanese education. You must have taught the young people to maintain their important values. What should be protected in the education? What values should be protected in the education was the second question often asked. It was very difficult for me to make it in words. When I looking back over my experience, elementary school, junior high, senior high, and university, I cannot recall. I was told history, I was told the the culture of Japanese systematically. I learned the kendo, the Japanese sword match game in the extracurricular activity, but I was not taught systematically what the Japanese culture is. How about you now, the younger generation? Have you ever been taught the cultural values or tradition values in the school education? Do your governments try to protect them? I answered to the questions. I do not think that Japan was successful so much because modernization process in a major area is a westernization. Modernization is not a westernization. We got the constitution from some country and we learned from others, in particular from the West. We incorporated several items from the West. So after the war, our modernization was Americanization. If we have enough time in the modernization process, then Japanese modernization should take place.
However, we don't have time. It is unavoidable, but because based on this experience, Japan, especially to developing countries, what can we provide and what can we tell? So I want you to think about this. I think you have various opinions. For example, the maternal handbook, the handbook for the expecting mothers. The maternal handbook is a health care book for children. The vaccines and medicines, records are recorded in that book for children. And also we have police boxes in Japan, and the police boxes are being introduced to Singapore to protect security in the area. So these measures have been introduced to other countries, but we have other experiences through the modernization. So that other countries expect Japan to provide such knowledge. I don't have enough time to speak, so I want to go to the agenda item number 3. Now, what course of action should Japan take in the future? It depends on the person, depending on the different experience and the background. And the people from Nagasaki and Hiroshima, they want to be vocal in the elimination of nuclear weapons. So the opinion varies depending on the person. And looking at the current situation around Japan, that is very difficult. North Korea's nuclear missile program, and China and Russia that have nuclear weapons. So Japan is surrounded by these countries. And then China is promoting the landfill in the Spratly Islands. So we can expect a lot of frictions between countries. The Northern Territories issue is one of them. So it is important to minimize the risks, to prevent the conflict from growing. So we should get wisdom from a short-term perspective. We must avoid another war. So to that end, what should we do? So it is important to think about what measures can be taken. And from the long-term perspective, I want to propose 2 points. One, through westernization and Americanization, that we have obtained something and lost something. And the basic value is what we have obtained. That is democracy and freedom of speech, the freedom religion. So freedom is what we have obtained through modernization, and also respect for the human rights, equality between men and women, and the protection of fragile people, and also the rule of law. Not the rule of king, but the rule of law. This is what we have learned from the European countries and the United States. This forms the foundation of the education in Japan. So we should share this with the other countries in the world in various ways. Finally, what should Japan be like? This says that a noble and dignified state. I want to tell you a story. Paul Claudel, a French a literature researcher, and he's one of the most important persons in the French literature. And his sister is Camille. She worked under the famous artist, and then she was very has a deep knowledge about Japanese culture, and he was affected by her sister, so he became a diplomat, and he became the ambassador to Japan, French ambassador to Japan, and he visited a lot of places in Japan while he was working here, and he had a communication with ordinary people. In 1943, at the end of that year, there was a evening party in Paris, and he made a speech. In 1943, thinking about the Japanese history, maybe you haven't learned a lot, but the students were mobilized in October in that year. The Meiji Shrine premises, the students were mobilized because the situation in war situation was very disadvantage to Japan. And in that party, he made a speech. He said, there is an ethnic group that I don't want to be destroyed. That is a Japanese. Japanese is the only ethnic group that valued the traditional civilization. Japan has developed so much in the modern times, but no wonder for me, because Japan has accumulated the civilization from the ancient times. That is why even after the Meiji Restoration, Japan has developed by observing the European culture. So no other such countries, and no other such country that are qualified for that. But Japan has a qualification for that because Japan has accumulated civilization from the ancient time. That is why Japan is qualified for that. This is what he said. And he also said that Japanese people are poor, but they are noble. In the Allied countries during the war, he's one of the French people who love Japan, and he need courage to make this speech. Before the end of World War II, Japan was very poor, but the Japanese people are noble. What does that mean, being noble? Noble, are you noble? I want you to be noble, but in your daily lives, it is important to be noble. And also the nation should be noble and dignified. Do you think so? Japan should be a dignified state, should aim to be a dignified state. And over the next 2 days, in your discussion, I hope you have this agenda item in your discussion. This concludes my speech. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Next, I'd like to invite Ms. Kaoru Nemoto, Director, United Nations Information Center. Her presentation is entitled, Your United Nations, Get Engaged as Change Maker Through SDGs. She graduated from the Faculty of Law, the University of Tokyo, joined TV Asahi, and earned a master's degree in international relations from Columbia University. From 1996 to 2011, she worked at the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Office to support refugees in Asia and Africa. She also worked as a spokeswoman for the World Food Programme, executive director at the Japan Association for UNCHR, and a freelance journalist before she was appointed to the current position in August 2013. Now, Ms. Nemoto, please.
You represent 30 different countries and regions in this room. I'm very excited to address to you at this very important occasion, and I would like to thank the Hiroshima Prefecture for inviting me to this occasion. In fact, I was here last year too for the first Junior International Forum, so it's my honor to be here again. In fact, I was together with you when you were listening to Ms. Ogura about her story as Hibakusha. It was a very, very moving, touchy story, first-hand account. And she strongly expressed her hope and expectation that all of you here are change makers to make this world a more peaceful place to live in. So I'm also addressing to you with my hope and expectation that you will be the change maker. And how many of you have heard about SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals? Raise your hands. Oh, I'm very much impressed. Yes, thank you so much. SDGs, that's a master plan to make this world a better and sustainable place to live in to the goal year 2030. And let's imagine what kind of world 2030 would be. I most likely will be retired. You will be the key player in the society, in your respective country and region. So it matters a lot whether the political leaders at this time will fulfill their commitments and promises against SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And SDGs is something you can relate to directly and take actions. You will be actors in addressing SDGs. So against this background, I would like to start my presentation. Ambassador Sano talked about the importance of communications. I communicate to you on behalf of the United Nations. I belong to United Nations Secretariat headquartered in New York. And my office, UN Information Center in Tokyo, is an outpost of UN New York in Japan. So it is a kind of UN's embassy based in Japan. And I communicate to the general public, mostly in Japanese, about the activities and agenda of the United Nations and the global values you should be aware of. Let me talk a little bit about myself. In fact, I grew up in Germany. I spent 4 years in Germany because of the job of my father. So I know from my childhood experience what it would be to live as a migrant. Language barriers, culture barriers. And I also learned as a child how important it is for foreigners have to have the rights protected. And I came back to Japan at the age of 13, went to school, went to university. And when I did job hunting, I realized that the society as a whole is not equal. If you are a woman at that time, there were very few jobs for which you can be recruited. And the following year, that kind of categorization, distinction vanished. And I learned behind this policy change, there was a treaty which was adopted at the United Nations, which was CEDAW, Convention to Eliminate Discrimination Against Women. So this was my first time to realize that what is discussed at the United Nations matters to me, to my rights, and to my life, and to my job. And I started off as a news presenter, announcer. But I worked in Tokyo, which is the capital of Japan, but I am originally from Kobe, the western side. So I had very, very strong Western dialect. So I felt humiliated that I was corrected every time by my senior news presenters that, your accent is wrong. So I thought it would be better for me to shift to news reporting. So I became the first female news reporter covering Japanese politics at the TV Asahi. And I was reporting about US-Japan trade disputes. And I felt, after the Cold War, I should learn how the people in the US think and decide. So I took special leave from the company and studied 2 years in New York, Columbia University, for my master's. And that really changed my life. At that time, it was in the middle of 1990s, Mrs. Sadako Ogata was the chief of UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And at graduate school, I was studying refugee issues and protection of refugees. So naturally, I got interested in the work of UNHCR, and I did my internship at UNHCR office in Nepal. And that really changed my life. And then I took exam and moved to the United Nations. Now, your country has constitution, right? What is the constitution for the United Nations? Anyone? UN Charter. UN Charter is, so to speak, UN's constitution. And there are 3 purposes for which the UN was established. One is maintenance of international peace and security, and then protection and promotion of human rights, and third, promotion of economic and social development. These are 3 pillars you have to be aware of. But these 3 pillars do not exist in silo. They are indivisible, interlinked. And this integrated approach is very much promoted in the 17 sets of goals, which are SDGs. This was adopted in September 2015 with so many heads of state and heads of government present at the General Assembly in New York. And this set of goals was adopted against a recognition that the world is not sustainable as it is. For example, global warming, climate change, it's affecting even Japan. And also many countries. Some of you are facing drought or too much rain, extreme weather. So if the planet goes on like this, in 2030, you cannot assume things which are taken for granted for now. For example, 4 seasons, which we enjoy now. Maybe in future, it's not maybe, it is likely that it will not be, you cannot enjoy 4 seasons as it is now in your future. So this encompasses mainly 3 aspects, which are economic, social, and environmental. And this has predecessor, which is called Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, which was implemented from 2001 to 2015. So this was again adopted when you were, around the time you were born. And MDGs is a set of 8 goals, mainly for developing countries, social development of developing countries. Developed countries like Japan were also involved, but in the context of means of implementation or international cooperation, or ODA, not necessarily about the domestic issues of developed countries. However, since the beginning of the new millennium, we have seen many new issues, most notably, as I spoke, climate change, global warming, but at the same time, gap, inequalities. Just before World Economic Forum this year, there was a shocking data released by Oxfam. 8 wealthiest men in the world, the wealth owned by these 8 people, equals to the wealth, total wealth owned by 3.6 billion people, the lower half of the world population. Can you imagine? What an inequality. And with this inequality, that there will be more instability, and people may be attracted by violent extremism. So it's also matters to peace and security in the world. So from 2012, for 3 years, there were consultations involving not only government officials or UN officials, but also representatives from private sector, businesses, universities, young people like you, and women, and disadvantaged people, to collect ideas and aspirations to put into the SDGs. So SDGs has 17 goals, which is more than double of MDGs. But it is a reflection that we listen to people's voices. Now, I show a short video which shows how these economic, social, and environment aspects are interlinked for developing and developed world.
This story began long before you. and it will continue long after you. But for now, this story is yours to shape. This is the story of humanity and of the earth we inhabit. This is our declaration of interdependence. Our commitment to honor the rights of all people everywhere. To protect the planet, our common home. To create shared prosperity. To strengthen universal peace and free the world from fear and violence. To work together in partnership so that no one is left behind. We will free the human race from the tyranny of poverty. We will heal and safeguard our planet for all generations and shift our world onto a sustainable path. As we embark on this collective journey, we pledge to include every human. So we gather, we build, we write, we create, we imagine, we collaborate, we dream, we play, we speak, we run, we work, we share, we love. This is the story you are shaping.
So, this is a common language of the entire world. All the 193 member states of the United Nations will be assessed against SDGs, both developing and developed countries. And this, the progress will be measured by 169 targets and 230 indicators. So, the UN is going to release a report about the progress in SDGs every year. This July, Japan reported at the United Nations on how much Japan has progressed against SDGs and how Japan is going to address to promote SDGs in future. And every 4 years, there will be a meeting at the United Nations at heads of state and heads of government level to take stock and to discuss way forward. And what is important is in Japan, there is a SDGs promotion headquarters chaired by the top, which is Prime Minister Abe, and joined by all the government ministers. And they decided that SDGs should be included in education curriculum for elementary and junior high school level. So it is really important to have understanding about SDGs because this will be the global common language. And you have to know it if you would like to lead globally. And one slogan which is very important for SDGs is no one left behind. Because during the time of MDGs, in a way, we thought if we pull the top level, then the impact, positive impact, will cascade down to the lower level, which did not take place. That's why the gap is widening now. So from the very beginning, we have to ensure that no one is left behind. Those people who tend to be neglected or forgotten should be reached out and put up. Malala Yousafzai, you have heard her name, right? She received Nobel Peace Prize at the age of 17. And she was there at the Summit of Sustainable Development in 2015 when SDGs was adopted. And she gave a very, very powerful speech on behalf of youth, which tends to be neglected. For example, unemployment rate at youth level is 3 times more than the unemployment rate in average. So Malala gave a very strong message, which I would like to show you.
Please welcome Nobel Peace Prize laureate and activist for girls' empowerment, Malala Yousafzai. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Before I start, I would like this environment to be a bit quiet and that people pay full attention to what the youth is asking here. Dear sisters and brothers, dear sisters and brothers, world leader sitting there, look up because the future generation is raising their voice. Today, we are 193 young people representing billions more. Each lantern we hold represents the hope we have for our future because of the commitments you have made to the global goals. In my life, I have experienced terrorism, displacement, and denial from education. And these are the tragedies that millions of children are still suffering. That shocking and heartbreaking image of Elan Kurdi lying dead on a seashore. The parents of the girls abducted by Boko Haram, tears flooding from their eyes, and little children on the Syrian border with no home, no hope. Force us to ask, how many more will we see being killed, being rejected, being neglected, and being homeless in society? How many more? The world needs a change. It cannot change itself. It's me, it's you, it's all of us who have to bring that change. Education is not a privilege. Education is a right. Education is peace. Dear world leaders, dear brothers and sisters, promise to all children in Pakistan, in India, in Syria, and across the world, promise them peace, promise them prosperity, promise an education. To my brave sister Salam, promise an education to my brave sister Salam and all refugee children, that wars cannot stop them from learning. Promise my sister Amina that our sisters abducted by Boko Haram will be brought back. that girls will be able to study in safety. Promise us that you will keep your commitments and invest in our future. Promise that every child will have the right to safe, free, and quality primary and secondary education. This is the real investment that the world needs and that the world leaders should do. I'm hopeful that we all and the United Nations will be united in the goal of education and peace, and that we will make this world not just a better place, but the best place to live. Education is hope. Education is peace. Thank you so much.
She was only 18 years old when she delivered this message, so around your age. She is not coming from a special family. Her mother cannot read and write. But her father has been very supportive to girls' education and encouraged her to take the lead. This shows that every one of you has potential to become a change maker like Malala. I think you have questions in your heart. You have anger about social injustice. You have to nurture that consciousness even when you grow up. And then you can become a change maker like Malala. Malala has raised voice for girls' education. And I want you to look at this flyer, which shows 17 goals. Girls' education directly relates to Goal 4 and Goal 5. However, it's not only that. I would like to show how these 17 goals are interlinked. These girls who are educated longer, once they grow up, they can get better job with more pay. So, Goal 1 and also Goal 8. And once they become mothers, they can raise their children more healthily and also provide more nutritious food. So Goal 2 and Goal 3. And they can become, they can represent the community in the discussion, so Goal 11. And also it will reduce inequalities, so Goal 10. And if there is peace talks, they can represent the community more confidently, so Goal 16. So these goals are all interlinked. So this is the integrated, indivisible nature of SDGs. It's not only Malala. Today, Ms. Ogura talked about Hiroshima Cup as the hope of Hiroshima people. Do you know who this lady is? It's Yusra Mardini, who is a Syrian refugee now living in Berlin. And she participated in the Rio Olympics as Olympian representing refugee team. So she is the hope of people forcibly displaced from home. And she showed that even refugees who tends to be seen as poor or deprived can even compete in Olympics games. So Goal 16, Goal 1, Goal 2, 3, Goal 4, Goal 5, Goal 10, these are all interlinked in the story of Yusra Mardini. And she became the youngest UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador this year. Also, imagine how many people live on Earth without electricity. We take electricity for granted, but 1 billion people, more than 1 billion people, live without electricity. And they are living in remote areas. So it's very difficult to organize all the facilities. But solar power can help. So electricity can be provided by solar power, and technology will help address their issues. And also, I want you to take a moment to think where fish, meat you eat are coming from. And also, the clothes you wear or shoes you wear. Where does it come from? Who are making it? How is it produced? Is human rights respected? Is environmental protection respected in the fishery? And the plastic bags. In the ocean, in 2050, there will be more plastics and microplastics than fish. If you don't take action to reduce the use of plastics, you cannot have fish as you have now. So this is something you can already address at your community or school level. As an example of what you, as student, can do, I would like to show you this. This is a booklet issued by the United Nations. Action for Disarmament, 10 Things You Can Do. And this was published by the United Nations only in English. The students at University of Tokyo learning disarmament thought disarmament is really an important issue for Japanese people. If there is no Japanese edition, then we can do the translation. So under a supervision by the professor, they did the Japanese translation over 9 months. But this became the first non-English edition. So the students made history. So if you have commitment, do it. Just do it like Nike. I think so far you have understood how important it is for people like you and me get involved. So social engagement is very important. And also understanding of SDGs and the role the general public can take needs to be understood. But, you know, it's very difficult for the United Nations or the government only to disseminate information. And in that respect, entertainment business, they can play a very important role, or TV media companies can take a role. So I think the Japanese students would know who is in the middle. It is Kiyoshi Nishikawa, the top comedian from the Japanese entertainment business. And Yoshimoto Kogyo, which is an entertainment giant in Japan, very strong in comedy stories, they produced a animation video to show what SDGs are, narrated by top comedians.
のみんなにいい未来を作るための17の目標を教えるよ。
1、貧困をなくそう王様の服いる人。2、
飢餓をゼロに葉っぱにキュウリを。
3、みんなに健康と福祉空を飛ばずに歩こう。
4、質の高い教育を。臭いロケンロール。
5、ジェンダーの平等を。男も女も踊ろう。
6、水とトイレの安全イカスミウォシュレット完備。
7、クリーンなエネルギーバッティング発電。8、働き街頭成長ヒーローにも給料を。
まだ倍あるよまだ倍あるよ続いていくよ。
9、災 産業と技術革新。これ何の機械だと思う
10不平等なくそうトレンチコートも半ズボンもええやん
11住み続けられる街
街は壊してええもんやない。
12作って使う責任バレーボールは捨てずにかぶろう
13気候変動の対策うちわで地球を冷やそう
14海を豊かに
着物で海に入らない
15陸も豊かに陸豊かです。
16すべての人に平和ピース
17パートナーシップ大事。一人じゃ無理ほんまやな。
For a better world For a better future 1234 5678 90 11 12 13 14 15 16 17の目標
17の目標で未来にトゥー
So this shows that you do not need always serious when you talk about SDGs. You can also have fun. And it was the case with Pikotaro. Pikotaro was chosen by Ministry of Foreign Affairs to represent Japan at the high-level political forum in New York when Japan did a presentation about its implementation of SDGs. And how many of you know Pikotaro? Oh, good. So I understand he is also famous abroad. He's known for his PPAP dance, and he really learned hard about SDGs and turned it into his PPAP dance.
SDGs 千葉県出身のピコ太郎と申します。SDGs っていうのなかなか聞いたことがなくて、そこで何だろうってことでようやくこう勉強させていただきまして、17個のゴールがある。すごくこの理想を語るのというのは恥ずかしかったり、特に日本人はするんですけども、全てが大事な important thing ですから、Sustainable Development Goals この言葉だけでも覚えてくれると、そこから What is SDGs? Oh, 70 goals. そこから next and sleeping. We have your love. We have your power. SDGs かなと思います。
Sustainable Development Goals It's 70
Okay, it was Pikotaro's debut at the United Nations. I hope he will continue this sustainably. And for example, you can do your own PPAP SDGs version with this very cosmopolitan group and show it to Pikotaro. I'm happy to convey your PPAP video to him. So I am leaving several copies of this booklet for your further studies, and I hope what I addressed today to you would be of support to your discussion further. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, we'd like to invite Ms. Kaori Kuroda, Executive Director, CSO Network Japan. Her presentation is entitled, What Can Civil Society Contribute in Achieving World Peace and a Sustainable Future? After working in a private company, she worked in the Center on Japanese Economy and Business at the business school, Columbia University, and the Asia Foundation. She has been in current position since 2004. She was concurrently assigned to Japan Director of the Asian Foundation in 2010, and she is a member of a roundtable for promoting SDGs and a representative director of Oxfam Japan. Ms. Kuroda, please. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. My name is Kuroda from CSO Network. Thank you very much for inviting me to the second Junior International Forum. Here, I'd like to talk about what can civil society contribute in achieving world peace and a sustainable future. When I say civil society, I include the NPO as well, non-profit organization, and what civil society can do will be discussed. This is my organization. Here, CSO means civil society organization. So it is similar to the NPO. So our mission is aims to contribute to achieving a just and sustainable society. This is our mission. And today, I'd like to talk about these three topics. First, the World Peace and Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Ms. Nemoto talked about SDGs already, so I'm not going to repeat so much. Second, the activities in achieving world peace: to learn, to think, and to tell your family and friends. Third, it is respect for diversity and inclusion. That is, those three are the topics. First, I will talk about world peace and sustainable development goals. First, what I will talk about what the peace is. So from the beginning, this morning, you will be repeatedly hear the peace, about peace and what the peace is. What is peace? We think that means we don't have war. Yes. In Hiroshima, 75 years later from the atomic bombing, and 2 days ago, it was a Memorial Day for the end of the war, when Japan was defeated in the World War II. We have a pledge for the renunciation of war, and we strongly hope to realize the world peace. However, is it really in peace if there is not a war? There was a question asked by Johan Galtung from Norway. He is one of the most prominent researchers of the peace study. And Galtung, after the World War II, even the war ended. Even the colonization ended. There are many people who are still suffering from poverty and hunger in Asia and Africa. And can we call this peace? The war and conflicts are not ongoing. However, we have to solve the problems of hunger and poverty. Then we can call this world peaceful. This is a question raised by the Galtung. And as shown here, the direct violence, and he established a concept of the direct violence and indirect or structural violence. And indirect violence, you can identify the main actor of the violence, and it hurts mentally and physically of the others. And the worst and the largest violence is war. The war drives many precious lives, and the houses, schools, and the public facilities in the large area are to be destroyed. The direct, indirect, and structural violence. In those violence, we cannot identify the perpetrator. But because of the political, economic, and social system, the hunger and poverty were created, and he called this is also violence. So not only poverty, but also poverty and hunger, but also discrimination against the gender and country, nationality, and oppression to the human rights. These are also called violence. And also the foreign forest destruction is also called the violence. Galton called the negative peace where the direct violence does not exist, and he calls the positive peace where you don't find poverty and hunger. So I'm not. He doesn't call which is important, but we have to see the peace from a larger perspective, and also these two pieces are deep connected in depth. So Ms. Nemoto talked about and explained well the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, so I will just briefly touch upon it. This is where we are living. So the global warming or the climate change are now spread, and the decrease in the wildlife is also a problem. So we cannot sustain if we don't change. That is the cause of the establishment SDG. So SDG is used to transform the unsustainable society to the sustainable development, to sustainable society. Without the transformation, we cannot realize the sustainable society. We have there's the peace, justice, and the strong institutions for all. That is goal number 16, and this is very important. And SDGs are 5 P's: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. These 5 elements are the basic principles. So I'm not going to repeat the characteristics of SDGs. University, leave no one behind. Integration was discussed earlier. Integration of economic, social, and environmental aspects, and diversity, and the linkages among goals. And also that we will seek to realize human rights of all, and achieve the gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. As said here, these 17 goals are the development goals and issues, and environmental issues and economic issues. The 16, as said earlier, is that is important to realize the goals from 1 to 15. And goal 17 is a partnership. In order to deal with, in order to work together with a diversified people, so that we can realize the sustainable development goals, then the 17 partnership is very important. And as Ms. Nemoto said, the goals are well connected and correlated. This shows a 3-layered, like a wedding cake. So I said first environment, then society is on the layer, and economy is on the top. So the goals, SDG goals, are all well connected. However, there are 17 goals, so that it may not be easy to understand. You may be full with the SDGs, but the goals should be realized in 2030. You here sitting with me, you will be early 20s or in 30s or early 40s at that time. I mean in 2030, and you are the key players in the society and communities. So you, younger generation, and children should be involved in the decision making of the SDGs. So this one is one of the activities of the NPO. Save the Children and organizations made a booklet called "The World We Want," and the number 16 is list shown here. There are small characters, so I would read it. Why is it so important for children and young people to feel safe in their homes and schools? What can you do to help promote the safety of children in your communities? What can be done so that you live in a safer world with less violence? These are the questions asked at the bottom, and these are discussed at schools with friends and in a community, and that kind of discussion is very important. Next, I'd like to move on to the second topic. That is the activities in achieving world peace, to learn, to consider, and to tell your family and friends. First, I would like to ask a request. So the Hiroshima high school students are here, senior high school students here, and international students, and the foreign students are here with us. You visited the Peace Memorial Museum this morning, and you listened to the Hibakusha's testimony of Ms. Ogawa. And what you felt, what you thought strongly today. There are many things you have thought, and in the next 2 days you will discuss what you thought, what you experienced, and then there's a discussion about the nuclear weapons, the number of the nuclear arsenal. You may think that you want to investigate that at home, and also there is a discussion about adoption of the Prohibition Treaty. So what you felt, what you thought in Hiroshima, I would like you to remember and tell that strong feeling to your friends and family when you go back to your country. From this slide, the structural violence, please keep your the structural violence and SDGs in your mind when I talk about this. So on the left side, I put the icon on the left side of the slide. So this is about the refugees, Syrian refugees. I will talk about the gap of the gap inequality. The company and the government are trying to solve the problems. Here, I would like to focus on the NPO and what kind of activities they are doing to solve the problems. First, that is children under conflict, and many children are suffered. About 250 million people are living in the areas of the armed conflicts, and 24 million children are living in a dangerous area in the 22 countries. So there are many activities NPO should do. I will introduce to you one. There is the International Energy World Vision. World Vision is supporting refugee children and their family, and they provide the daily necessity and food, and sometimes they can provide education. And it is June the 20th is a day of refugee. UNHCR, private companies, and refugees and NPOs are invited to talk about the crisis of refugees in the world, and also the issues of the Japanese issues of the refugees who come to Japan, and that they are discussed. And NPO support of the Syrian refugee. This is a different NPO, AAR Japan, Nanmin o Tasukeru Kai. And in this NPO, from 2012, in the southeastern part of Turkey, they are providing support to refugees who fled from Syria. Their necessities, food are provided, and the support of the disabled, and they also operate a community center for the Syrian refugees. And in particular, the Syrian refugees who have disability is well supported. And then child labor. And the number of the children in child labor is about 168 million. According to the Treaty Convention of the International Convention, the children are defined as 18 years or younger, and they are forced to work. If they are helping their parents, that is not included in child labor. And the children under the 18 years, if they are working in the dangerous area or the hazardous labor, that is called child labor. And ACE, this is Japanese NPO, and they protect the children in the cotton production area in India from child labor, and they support the schooling. And in a cotton production area, you often see the child labor. And in Ghana's cacao production, and they provide a similar support. And education, as Ms. Nemoto said, Ms. Malala, who appeared in a video, in 61 million children cannot go to the elementary school. The world's largest lesson. This was commenced in 2003. By the global network of the NPO, there are many students participating in that. In 2008, 8,850,000 children participated in this class lesson. So once SDGs were established, the quality education was included, and the proposal for the educational policies are also given by this NPO. And I'll talk about hunger now. It is something like 795 million people are in hunger, and 1/3 of all food produced is lost every year. In the developing countries, the loss of food is caused between the production and the processing. And in advanced countries, including Japan, the loss is created in the retail. And in order to solve these problems, the NPO, the Hunger-Free World, look into the eating habit and family habit, and to see the problems there. They are seeking for how to solve them, and they have a workshop where the people can learn the problems. Food bank also is getting popular. And then finally, I'll talk about poverty and hunger, poverty and inequality. Oxfam, Ms. Nemoto said, Oxfam's issue report that just 8 people earn the same wealth as 3.6 billion people who make up the poorest half of the humanity. And this report was issued January this year. And in the area of the inequality society, people tend to be aggressive, and discrimination is worsened, and the community linkage is weakened, and the strong stress will cause the early death. So the inequalities is on the opposite side of peace.
In Japan, we have seen the equality problem and child poverty problem. The Moyai Support Center for Independent Life is supporting the underprivileged people to rise out from poverty through the consultation and support. There are many issues around the world, but I have talked about the problems that are related to the structural violence, and a lot of NPO groups and civil groups who are working on this issue and what kind of activities they are doing. I have explained about that. Finally, there are many groups involved in tackling a lot of global issues. And to achieve the peaceful world, what are needed, which is respect for diversity and the future in coexistence. The UNESCO is a United Nations institution, and it says that education is an important role. And so the preamble of the UNESCO Charter states that that since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that defenses of peace must be constructed. And the 2000 was designated as the International Year of the Culture of Peace, and then the decade from 2001 is designated as the International Decade for Culture of Peace and Nonviolence for the Children of the World, and they have been working on. And then there are some action areas. First, fostering a culture of peace through education. The second, promoting sustainable economic and social development. Third area, promoting respect for all human rights. The fourth area, ensuring equality between men and women. Fifth area, fostering democratic participation. The sixth, advancing understanding, tolerance, and solidarity. The seventh, supporting participatory communication and the free flow of information and knowledge. And the eighth area, the promoting international peace and security. So they are promoting these areas, and then a lot of NPO groups and schools are engaging in a lot of activities to support these goals. And then there is an interesting guide that I want to introduce to you regarding this matter. This guide was created by an NPO and provided to the schools. This is an guide to the Resolving Conflict Creatively program, and there is just one guidebook copy here. This program was created by the Morningside Center for Teaching Social Responsibility. So this guideline was co-founded with the New York City Department of Education, and then Japan NPO Development Education Society made a translation of this guideline and issued the Japanese version. This program is to develop skills for children, and let me introduce to you the table of contents. This focuses on the measures skills to improve the communication and comprehension of capability. So it is important to be aware of diversity and bias, and also counter bias. So these things should be promoted, and this guide promote these things. And what can we do to create peace? The changemaker was mentioned in the earlier presentation. So each one of us can be a changemaker, And this the program related to this is also included these cards. Now, diversity and overcoming differences. To this end, it's very effective to carry out interactive collaboration programs. And this junior forum is one of the good examples. Interacting with people with different backgrounds is very important. There are many other international interaction programs. One of them is a peace boat. Through international activities, people can learn a lot of global issues. And I have also joined this one, the Northeast Asian Civil Society Forum. Through the mutual understanding and reconciliation, this forum is held by Japan, China, and South Korea since 2008. So it's been 8 years since then. And this fall, another forum will be held. So I'd like to conclude my speech. I talked about matters regarding the respect for diversity and the future of coexistence. So I want to mention these things. So it is important to be interested in what you don't know. Being curious is very important. And another important thing is to listen to others carefully. As the former ambassador said, communication is very important. Even if the people think differently, you need to listen to them. By doing so, you can notice something that you don't know. And another important thing is to take part in social activities. Whatever you can do it. And another point is the active interaction with people with different backgrounds. And also the active participation in problem solving. It's very difficult to take part in, not only for young people, but adults. So this is the final slide of my presentation. The best way toward peace starts with the respect for human rights and diversity. So let us respect for diversity, work around our differences to realize our common future. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. This concludes the keynote speeches. When you leave the auditorium, please return the interpretation receiver and hand the questionnaire to the staff at the exit. Please make sure you have all belongings with you. Thank you very much for joining us today.